Hi there, Ramon here from Memories, and today we have
Jonda Peterson.
Hi Jonda, and how long have you been a caregiver?
I was a caregiver for probably the majority of my life, to be honest with you. My mother had some mental health issues, and that was one of the things that I wanted to share. But as far as her dementia was concerned and hands on, where she moved into my home with my family for 5 years.
5 years. And you said that you've been a caregiver for a long time. Would you mind walking us through what the early caregiving was like for you before the dementia diagnosis?
With the bipolar diagnosis, there was the mania and the depression and the extreme mood swings that come with that. So the caregiving that was involved with that were emotional. There was a lot of movement around from home to home, or she would want to move out of state, or she want to move back in state. So those were the things that I would take care of, setting up the move, setting up things for her, making sure that she had all the things that she needed. My mother was very, very smart, though. She was a teacher. And so she was a very intelligent woman. So she knew pretty much how to mimic what looked like normal behaviors. But when that would break down, then she would call me, and then I would kind of supplement whatever she needed at the time, whether it was reaching out to someone when she got her disability. I made arrangements for her to meet with the board, and then I went with her. So it was a lot of emotional kind of logistics things. But then as the dementia came into the picture, it became more and more hands-on, going to get her groceries, making sure she had clothes, things like that.
Wow. Um, like that sounds like a lot to juggle. So I guess my next question to you would be, how has this experience being in this caregiving role for so long affected you emotionally, having to care for your mother in that way?
Um, Today, a year almost, my mother died July 27th of 2019. And
Okay.
so a year from that and going through the grief, and then you have the pre-grief because you see her kind of, fading away is I don't know a better term for that, because you could just see their personality going away, her mannerisms changing. There's grief associated with every step for me, and I'm sure everyone else with that as well. But today, um, I do feel a lot better emotionally. To be perfectly honest, I feel um, relieved for her that she's not suffering, and I feel satisfied that I did everything I knew that I could humanly do. Was it perfect? No. Was it always the most informed? No, because I'm not a medical professional, but it was always from the best place that I knew how to tap into at that time. And I feel very satisfied with the idea that I know I took care of her to her last day, and that hopefully she's resting in peace, or wherever she is, she knows I did the best I knew how to do.
Firstly, my condolences. Um, and secondly, I think that's a very mature and respectable opinion to have, or kind of view to take on this matter. Like, you did the best you could, you did all you could, and I think you can rest easily knowing that you did the best for her. Thank you for sharing that. And I guess, so what were some initial challenges that you faced, whether that be physical, logistical, or emotional challenges upon the dementia diagnosis? And then, what advice would you give to someone who may be facing those challenges right now?
The diagnosis, I don't know exactly how everyone gets to that point. So I noticed for a long time my mom having little notes around the house. And then I noticed the house, my mother was immaculately clean. And then I noticed that the house wasn't looking the way she normally kept her house. And then I noticed her clothes were not clean as they should have been. And so I would go over and kind of, work with her on that. But again, having a mental illness background, initially I wasn't sure what part of this was the natural progression of the bipolar disorder, the fact that elderly people don't metabolize their medication the way that they did when they were younger. So I didn't know if the lithium wasn't working properly, if there needed to be a new cocktail. So that was a conversation that I would have, and we would go to her psychiatrist. But once it was very clear, after we went to, in Columbus, we have a place called the Gerlach Center, John Gerlach, and it was a specialized place for memory care and diagnosis and support. And so once I finally encouraged her to go there, and we got the diagnosis, then I think at that point it was a process of letting it settle into her mind, because my mom was very strong-willed, and she didn't want she didn't want to know for many, many years. And so we got to a point where, and even when she wanted to drive, and I would try to beg her not to drive. And she got lost one day, and she says, she called me and said, "Can you come and get me?" And I said, "Mom, I don't know where you are. This is precisely why I've been begging you not to drive." And that was the day that I think it set into all of us that I'm going to now have to step up and be more aggressive in terms of my caretaking. And so from that point on, I think the most difficult thing for me was that the fact that my mother was so smart. She'd spent a lifetime compensating for bipolar disorder. So it wasn't new for her to do things to offset what she knew were deficits in her cognition. So that was the challenge, just getting her to cooperate, getting her to understand that I'm not trying to hurt you. This diagnosis is not trying to hurt you. This is simply us trying to muster together all the resources that we possibly can. And I can't do that unless you let the doctors examine you and assess you and see where you are. So I would say the first step was just the complete denial, the complete, lack of cooperation. I have a brother that lives in Columbus as well. But I'm the older sibling, I'm the only girl. So things kind of fell to me, and my husband and I, we've been married it'll be 31 years next month. So he was a great support. And I think, and my daughter, she's turned 20 in 2 weeks. So they were very good about helping me when I would have days where I just thought I could not take another moment. Because of course, as most caregivers, we're still working. I was working part-time, thankfully. I didn't have to have a full-time job. But I have a daughter who was in high school and taking college classes at the time. I had a husband. I mean, you still have the regular things of life. And I've been diagnosed with lupus for 17 years. So I had my own health challenges. So there were just days where her lack of cooperation, I know, all the literature says don't take it personal, but when she's in your house and when you're tired and when it's your mom and she looks like your mom, but she's not acting like your mom, I think it's a lot more challenging, than people realize, to siphon out and sift out what part of this is just her being difficult because she knows how to do that, and really the disease that's taking over for her. So I think that learning that was probably the first most challenging steps in really attacking how to support her with this disease.
Sure. You touched on so many great points that I'd love to expand on. First, happy anniversary to you and your husband, and happy birthday to your daughter. I love this idea of cooperativity and them not collaborating as easily as they could, and the difficulties that can place mentally on caregivers. So I would love if you could maybe expand on some advice or some things you would say in those kind of difficult situations, so people who are watching, going through those, can learn from what you've been through.
I can say, again, I'm a year past the eventuality of it all. So I can say, looking back, I should have stepped up, and my brother uses the term, put your foot down. I was raised, where you respect your mom. So I'm asking her for her permission instead of just quietly making the decisions. And I think that for me, in our family dynamic, that made the stress level way higher than it needed to be in hindsight. At the time, I'm trying to get her cooperate. I'm trying to make her understand I don't want to, take over your bills and get into your checking account without your permission. And I don't want to, take your keys away from you, even though I know it's not safe. Even though I walk into the kitchen and I see you trying to eat your keys. I know, psychologically, I know we're at that point, but your heart, you're raised to respect your elders. You're raised to, and even with my mother with a mental illness my whole life, I still was raised with the thought of you respect your elders. So it took me longer, I think, than it should have for me to just very quietly take over. My brother had to really basically shake me up like, Jonda, it's time for you to, make some decisions, and you can't keep asking mom if it's okay. You have to just go do it. Because I was her power of attorney, and then I was the person who was the executive of her estate. And I'm the oldest and the only girl. So they all looked to me to do it. And I just think it was really hard. And my mother had been difficult for a long time. So our relationship had been complex and our history had been interesting, obviously, with the bipolar disorder for a very long time. And so my brothers were done. They had gone no contact with her off and on for several years. I never really did. And so it does take a toll. I was exhausted. I felt ill-equipped to deal with her. I had no medical training whatsoever. It's difficult to make people take medication that will make them sleep so that then you can sleep, so that you can go to work the next day. We don't have the capability here to administer, medications intravenously without a nurse. Her insurance did not cover a nurse unless she was absolutely immobile, and she wasn't for a long time. So it was an overwhelming feeling of just, there are times where I just felt defeated, to be perfectly honest. I remember that very, very clearly. She just would not take her medicine. She hated, and I have a video and I keep it with me because she sat down one day on one of her more clear days and she said, and I quote, "I want to be the master of my destiny." My mother was very smart. She was a literature major and she was very, very smart. And she knew that she wasn't anymore. And she could feel that slipping away on the days where she was more coherent and aware than other days. And that was hard to watch as well. It was much easier once she didn't know. But when she was going through the period where she was losing, so then she would be just difficult because I know she was angry and she was resentful. So that was, for me, in my experience, that was the difficulty. To be perfectly honest with you, some days like, "Mom, are you freaking kidding me? I'm just trying to help you." And "Oh, that's right, Jonda. She's just mad because I would be mad too."
And again, you touched on so many great points. And I really like this last point of almost empathy and trying to understand where they're coming from. But I think that takes time because, one, you're dealing with everything that's going on outside of your caregiving experience. Two, you're emotionally taking in what's going on in terms of watching what's happening to your mother. And then three, you're angry and frustrated because of all the effort that you're putting in. So I think it takes time to get to that place where you can be a little more empathetic, the ability to see it from their perspective and see the pain and anger that they're experiencing. And I think that takes time. And I think caregivers who are struggling to get there shouldn't be as hard on themselves. I know you touched on guilt because it's a lot of things to accept, and it's a lot of very difficult things to accept, and it takes time. So thank you so much for bringing that up.
May I add to that?
For sure.
May I add to that? It's not a linear progression either. So there might be weeks where she doesn't know what's going on. And then she wakes up one day and she knows exactly what's going on. And then she's mad. And she's like, I remember, I was going to give you two examples of really frustrating days. She kind of walked up on me like she wanted to hit me. And I was like, well, first of all, you're not gonna do that, right? she knew enough to know not to do that. I'm 6 foot tall. She did look up and she thought, yeah, maybe I shouldn't. Not that I would have hurt her or anything, but just call your mind back to reality of the fact that we're not gonna do that. But also just I could feel her rage. And I think there were times when I hadn't slept in 3 or 4 days that she felt my rage as well. And I might not have voiced it to her. But I remember one day I was in the kitchen, and this is probably completely inappropriate, but I don't care because I know this is part of our life. We were in the kitchen and I was making her waffles. And she walks around the corner and she throws a complete fit because she doesn't want waffles, she wants pancakes. And I literally took the toaster and I threw it in the floor. And I was just done. I didn't cuss at her, I didn't scream, I was just done. And I remember my husband, he walked in and he looked and he calls my brother and he was like, "You might want to come over here and talk to your sister. I think she's just snapped." And I remember that day just thinking, how many people have gotten to this point? And how many people at that point say, "I'm not doing this anymore"? Or how many people at that point go get a drink or do something self-destructive or do something, that is beyond the pale because you have those days where you're almost like, what the actual beep is going on? And I just think that's one of the things that I wanted to express. It's only fair to acknowledge that. It's like parents. You're not going to not raise your voice at your kid ever. There's no perfect parenting and there's no perfect caregiving. There just isn't. And we've never done this before. And there's no school to go to learn how to do this. So I would say, when I read the literature and it's, always be kind and try to distract, none of that worked with my mother. My mother was very smart. She would even tell me, don't play it. No, don't do that to me. So all the things that they redirect, do this to that, it doesn't work with everyone. And so then what do you do? There's no literature on how do you deal with someone who is absolutely right now being completely defined. So you just do the best you can, moment by moment, day by day.
Sure. And I think that just speaks to another reason for the importance of having these conversations, is because these kind of things are difficult to talk about. They're much harder to talk about. Oh, my loved one did something funny, let's share it on social media. Oh, my loved one is in a great mood, let's go for a walk. These difficult experiences, these moments, these like climactic moments when you've had enough, when you're close to reaching your boiling point, there needs to be more of a discussion on what caregivers can do, or what resources can be made available to caregivers to help deal with that, because that is just as much of a reality, if not more reality than caregiving, than the positivity that is currently being shown. So thank you for sharing that super important point to bring up. I would love to chat about balancing your family life. You have a husband and an older daughter who's, he said, turning 20 in a few weeks. How was balancing being a mother and a wife on top of, and having a job on top of being a caregiver? And what advice do you have to any women or men who are struggling with balancing family life with caregiving?
I did write some notes, so I don't want to seem disingenuous, but I wanted to make sure that I covered that because couple of things.
Yeah.
I wrote down self-care. And so there is a website, it's called Dementia Care Blazers. And it's a doctor, her name is Dr. Natalie Edmonds. And she was, for me, a connection to help, because my mother was a teacher. And so because of her mental illness and because of her physical limitations, she was retired. So I don't know the teacher salary in the United States, just enough, but not enough really. So we couldn't afford memory care facility. They're very, very expensive. And with her additional mental health issues, we would call, they would go, oh yes. And then they would get her medical history and they go, oh, we don't have any room. So you don't even always have that option. So little things like in the bathroom, I had books in there about caregiving. I had caregiving for this caregiver soul in there. I had her videos. When I take a bath, I would play, because she has a very calming voice, and she would just talk about things like this that are reality. When your family members who aren't there every day and who pop up whenever they want have, their opinions to say. I had a cousin that came by, and bless her soul, my mother didn't have, at one point, she didn't have her false teeth. Well, what she didn't know is this is her third set of dentures. My mother had hid them, and then after a while, it was, in my opinion, unsafe for her to have them because she didn't quite know what to do with them, and I didn't want her to choke on them. So we were pretty much giving her like mashed potatoes and soft food at that point. So, people come in, and I didn't feel like explaining all that to her, because I felt like if you hadn't been here the whole time, I'm not doing that. The people who were here, they already know why she doesn't have teeth, and they already know what I feed her. And the people who aren't, if you have judgment calls, I'll let you deal with that. So I was going to say, one, kind of categorizing the advice, categorizing the judgment. That is something that I found to be very helpful, because people have opinions, like when you're raising your children, people have a million opinions about what you should be doing. And when you say things like, would you like her for a week? Would you like her for a month? Because I can use the break. Oh no, I don't have a kid. I don't have it. Then, keep that to yourself. Also, second, yes, I was tired of hearing that. And then the bathroom, just taking time, extra time, because I do know from my mom, she was accepting of, for the most part, until the very end, Jonda's in the bathroom, that's her time. So that's when I could light a candle, I could take a bath, I could listen to a video that spoke about maybe whatever symptoms were going on. When the sundowning started and I had to go to work, that was excruciating. And so I had to take the doors off the closet, because she would all night long, with the doors and everything. And then she would take her clothes off, and then she would, get onto the floor. And then every couple of hours, I would realize she was on the floor like a child. My husband and I, and she's 6 foot as I am, and not a small woman. My husband and I would go in there, and we'd put her back in the bed and get her dressed. And then 2 or 3 hours later, back on the floor again. So those times are very excruciating. And your question was, what advice would I give to people who have jobs? I was very, very transparent with my employer. I don't know how many employers care, but mine did. I worked in a school setting. I worked for behavioral science specialists, so I work in the mental health field. And my direct boss was wonderful. Dr. Tilly is amazing, and the school administrator that we had a contract with, she was understanding as well. And so I think being open to sharing your experience and not trying to act like, you know, I run the universe, because I don't, and I'm not Superwoman, I'm not. And so just letting people know, because they don't know how they can support you if you don't tell them. And acting like everything is perfect and acting like you have control of everything, which I did initially, that's why I can speak on don't do it, that was just self-defeating, is it doesn't get you the help or the support that you need. Now, what I did find, to be honest, is the help didn't come from the places that I thought it would, but it came from surprisingly different places. So I would just say, share what you're going through, whatever belief system you have, whatever that might be. I leaned into that very heavily. And allowing people to help you. That was my next thing. When people do offer, when they say, is there something I can do? You know, yes, actually you can. Do you mind going to the grocery store and picking up her medication or picking up some milk or whatever? And I found that the people who were sincere, they were happy to help. They felt good about being available. So that's something else I would tell people. And no one's going to do it the way you do it. That is for sure. My brother ended up having my mom in his house for the last 2 weeks of her life. And he doesn't do anything the way I do it. But I had to let that go, because at that point, my own emotional state, mental state, and physical state had been so worn thin. And my mom had, at that point, decided that she wasn't going to eat anymore. So I just thought maybe a change of circumstance would help her. She just got out the hospital, and when she came out, she still wouldn't eat anything. So I thought, well, maybe if she goes to my brother's house, she'll, you know, get excited because she'll be around her other grandchild and my brother, but it didn't really work that way. But allowing him to help me was big, because I knew he doesn't cook the way I do. He doesn't clean. He's a single man. He doesn't clean the way I clean. He does not going to make sure that her outfits match the way I did. And then I realized, you know, maybe some of those things aren't as important as I thought they were. Maybe he's not going to comb her hair just right. Maybe that's okay. So allowing people to help and understanding that it's okay. That's a big thing. But I don't even know, I say that in hindsight, I don't even know who could have told me that when I was going through it. I don't even know. So I understand caregivers who, it's easy for me to say that looking back, but when you're in the middle of it, you feel so responsible and you don't want to be neglectful, and you feel so much duty and responsibility to make sure that things are just right. That the idea of letting someone who's not going to do things just right, and heaven forbid a man, a brother do it, you know, that was just beyond my comprehension at the time until I was forced to. So those would be the things. Self-care, if it has to be even in the bathroom, accepting help, and then leaning into whatever your belief system is.
So many beautiful points that I just want to build off of super quickly. I love this idea of reaching out for help, but also accepting help. I think that's such a unique perspective that we haven't heard, because you're caring for this person, you have so much love for them, you have this certain almost caliber of care that you expect them to be given, but not everyone is capable, or not everyone wants to, or not everyone is going to do it the way you're used to and you're accustomed to. But it doesn't make it bad or worse, so you should be accepting of that help. I think that's such an important message to hear. So thank you. That was wow. So many great points for us to jump off of there. I would love to chat a bit about how you, as Jonda, have grown, like as a person, from being a caregiver for so long. You know, it's such a monumental part of your life for a very, very long time. So how have you developed and changed as a result of that?
Wow, I didn't think about that question. I thought about resources and websites. I didn't even think about that. I know that it's definitely made me more introspective, very much so, because there were times where I was so proud of what I did, And then there were times where I was ashamed. I was ashamed that when I would pull into the driveway and the caregiver was there, that I didn't want to go in the house sometimes. I was ashamed that I was so angry with her because I felt robbed of the idea that there was a mental health challenge my whole life. So I did not get the kind of mothering that I tried to give to my daughter. I hope her experience and her perspective is that I was able to give her that. But I was very upset and angry and resentful that here I am again, having to rearrange my life to accommodate her. And even though I knew that this was like the mental illness, something beyond what anybody could control, I just resented the idea that at what point do I get mothering? At what point does she take care of me? And so I had to let go of that. I had to let go of what I wanted things to be and accept that this is what it is. And these might be just the gifts that I need to help the next person. And so when I started looking at it like, one day, all this that I've gone through is going to help even one person. No, it's okay on those angry days. I'm going to be honest about it. I'm not going to just post, my mother and I did our makeup today, or my mother and I crocheted today. We did those things. And then we had days where I threw the toaster at the floor. I mean, we have to be honest about the whole experience. I was ashamed about that day. As soon as it hit the floor, I thought, oh my God, Jonda. Just there are just days where I was proud of myself and days where I was absolutely just disappointed in my reaction. And then I had to learn self-love. I had to let myself understand that I'm not perfect. And so all my reactions are not going to be perfect. As long as I didn't cross the line, as long as I didn't do anything to scare her or harm her or, hurt her in any way, and she felt loved up to the end, because we talked about that. She goes, I do feel love. I feel safe in this house. I feel loved in this house. I just don't like what's happening with my mind. And so for her to be able to articulate that to me, and I recorded it, that meant a lot. That kind of released me from the unrealistic expectations that I placed on myself. So I think this experience has made me learn to open up more, to be more vulnerable, to be more transparent, which allows me, when I stop judging myself so much, it allows me not to be so judgmental of other people as well. Because I remember, going around to different facilities as I was trying to educate myself and having judgment calls on, okay, that one looks cleaner than that one, or these people look happier than that, or just I don't have full information about why it looked that way at that time. And so learning that if somebody walked into my house on the days where my mother had just, put defecation on the wall, that they might think that I'm not as clean as I wanted to be on the days where that wasn't happening as well. You can't come in and have a snapshot picture and think you're going to size up the whole situation. So I think it's taught me to be much more understanding, more forgiving, and more self-aware, much more self-aware.
I think that's such a beautiful thing that you don't often get to hear, and I love this idea of being understanding, because as you spoke about in your experiences, you've been there and you've experienced like judgment from people who don't know much about your situation. So what right do you have to judge someone based on this quote unquote like snapshot of their life that you have? And I think that's not only applicable for caregiving, but also just for life in general. So thank you for sharing that. I think that's a really interesting perspective on self-growth that we haven't heard. I would love to chat with you about social media a bit and how that has played a role in your caregiving experience. As you mentioned, that you're now more willing to share and more open. How's that been for you?
It's been good. I started a web page at the very end because I think that was something that was kind of therapeutic for me. And so when she went into the hospital, and I knew that was the last time, and I knew she wasn't going to actually be coming out, I could just tell by what was going on. I took pictures of that progress so that the family members who ever wanted to see it, her friends, if they couldn't come, were able to see what was happening. And I think that did help me. I had an Instagram page, and it was I still have it. In fact, I changed it over because in this whole process, I became a certified life coach because I wanted to, again, like I said, if I could help one person feel better, then I feel like that might be exactly why I went through all this and exactly why I'm not afraid to speak on the good, the bad, and the ugly of the whole situation. So social media was helpful. Like I said, the dementia care blazers, if I didn't have access to that, if I didn't have Dr. Natalie explaining, the denial process of the patient, the process that you go through with your family, things that you can do to make sure that you are a power of attorney, and when you go to the doctor you are able to make medical decisions for them. All those things, I knew them, but to hear someone else say make sure you do this was very helpful. So social media, and even just attachment to access, I shouldn't say attachment, access to just the outside world. When you go to work, you come home, you're exhausted, then you do have, I didn't have TikTok at the time, but you do have something that you can look at where you see other people and you can kind of, search for other caregivers. There was one man and his mom, and I can't remember what his name was. He was very helpful. He and his mom were in the car, and he would take her places, and he was taking care of her as she was dealing with Alzheimer's as well. And that was helpful because just seeing her reaction and seeing him, respond to her, just felt like home. It just felt like I'm not alone. And it felt like, so I know what you're doing for people is going to be so, so helpful, because we might not be able to make appointments to see people in person. And it might be 3:00 in the morning when you finally get, your loved one settled down and have a 5 minutes to take a break, and you want to see somebody tell you you're not going crazy. It's not you. This is part of the process. Social media and things like this website, this platform that you're using is going to be so helpful to so many people, I think.
Thank you for saying that. I mean, it is really the reason why we do this, is because we recognize that there's just so many different aspects to this role, more than even can be listed. Even I feel like there's no words to describe like the pain and the stress and the consumption of it being a caregiver. I love this idea that you brought up about having this feeling of connection. Especially like this advice that you're giving, all these amazing points. You're not going to find this on Google. You're not going to find this in the literature. You're only going to get this from people who've been there in the good, the bad, and the ugly moments. And we really want to showcase exactly people like you. So the you 5 years ago or the you 6 years ago, someone who's in those shoes can watch this and have that hindsight and that perspective and keep these words in mind when they're going through the experiences that you went through. I would love to chat with you a little bit about your life coach role. I think that's super interesting. You said that this experience of being a caregiver kind of pushed you towards that. So I'd love to chat about just that journey for you professionally and how that relates to your caregiving.
I worked in the mental health field. I worked for a company called Behavioral Science Specialist. Dr. John Tilley. I worked as a psychology assistant under him. So in the United States, if you either have a social worker degree or if you have a psychology degree, you can't offer services unless you're a doctor. And so, but you could be an assistant and work underneath a doctor, and he trained you to do certain things. So I worked with him in our common pleas department for court for our county for several years. And then he had a contract where I worked in the school system as student support, which was basically, the psychology department. And so he would come in and evaluate students, and then we would set up a plan, and then I would execute that under his direction. So the next logical thing for me was to take those skills of understanding behavior, cognition, things like that, and then transfer it into, because I leaned heavily on him on the days where I thought my brain was going to explode. What do you think? Am I doing something wrong? Am I thinking about this wrong? Can you give me another perspective? And he was so gracious and so generous with his advice, with his listening. I wanted to offer that. Not that I am a clinician or someone who's able to offer any sort of medical advice, because I don't have those credentials, but what I have is years of study, years of interacting with people, years of helping a doctor evaluate and provide services to people. And then when you add that on to the experience of just, I lived this, I thought if somebody, and I don't even know, I'll back up the truck and say, I don't think that everyone needs treatment. I don't think that everyone needs diagnosis. If you're a caregiver, you might not have any mental health issues other than the stress of that moment. So it might not be necessary for you to see a doctor. You might not need social services care, but you might need a listening ear from someone who is not in your family, so that when you say, I'm about to lose my mind, they don't get all up in arms. Or if somebody came to your house that was your family and gave you some unsolicited advice, you might want to talk about that to somebody. Or if you're just tired and you just don't know, things you haven't thought about before. Like I said, taking the doors off the closet, or, different routines that we got into for sundowning, or just, mental wellness resources that I use to help me just keep my nervous system and my adrenaline system from being revved up on high all the time. So that's kind of what made me start taking the courses and start going through the certification process, and just wanting to offer people who needed that kind of support. So I have clients that come to me for life coaching who come from those fields, that my previous lives. But I definitely know that after talking to people have started to come and need support for that, especially during this time where you're already isolated, and then there's more mandatory isolation. And then there is the fear that you're going to, I can only imagine the fear that when you go to the store, being extra careful that you don't come home if you have that person in your home and make them sick, or your family member. I can only imagine living with someone right now who is elderly in the midst of a pandemic. I can't even, those caregivers, I don't even know how my hat's off to them. So that's kind of how my life coaching journey kind of evolved. I just wanted to help people with what I had the credentials to do and the experience to offer, without any diagnosis, without any treatment, without anything like that. And that's why my business is called An Empathetic Ear, because that's really what it is. It's just somebody who understands where, the caregiving process is, been through the whole thing, even post caregiving, and can give some perspective on that.
Amazing. I feel that's such an important resource, such a required resource, and it's just something that I think is going to make such a big impact in so many people's lives, like having that third party neutral support who's been through experiences that you're currently living through and can give you tangible advice that's going to make the situation better. I think that's amazing. So if anyone watching this video right now wants to learn more about your organization or seek out your services, where can they find you?
My phone number is in the United States, 614-772-3172. And my email address, that probably would be the easiest way to have some contact, is Peterson J, PETERSONJ an empathetic ear. So ANEMPATHETICEAR @gmail.com. So PetersonJ. An empathetic ear @gmail.com would be the way to contact me. So, or on my webpage, on Instagram, Jonda. I forgot exactly what it's. Let me look back here and see what it's called. That's terrible, right?
Platforms, them all. Sure thing.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, for sure. So just to reiterate that was petersonj.empathetic@gmail.com for your email.
Yes, and empathetic ear, yes. And my email address is Jonda, lowercase, Jonda_K, K-A-Y. So it says personal coach, it's a business account. It's got my certification information on there, a picture of my parents who both passed away. So this is my website. So the picture looks just like me. So I haven't really posted a lot because that's kind of, I think the 1 year anniversary is when I thought, okay, I think I've processed this enough to be able to open up and speak about it without getting emotional still, and really process my own feelings so that I can get to the root of what was that overwhelm? Was it, just frustration, or were there other things involved? And so I think it took me about a year to be able to siphon through that and be able to be honest with people and say what I was feeling was, rage or resentment or whatever it was, other than just I was frustrated.
Amazing. And I just, so Peterson J jonda.empatheticear@gmail.com, and your email.
Yes. And I was going to let me show you. This is the card.
Yes. So we will include this information in our posts. We'll have all this in the link below, so you can contact this amazing resource. Just so full of information and advice. Thank you so much for chatting with us today and being so candid and open. It was amazing, amazing, amazing to hear your perspective. I love.
Is it okay if I take a picture of our screen? Because I'm so thankful and appreciative of what you guys are doing as well.
Thank you.
Yes, because I wish there was something like this, or if there was, I hadn't found it yet. I just hope there's enough people out there who can pass the word, because this is so needed. I remember thinking, where is the support other than medical, if your insurance covers it, for just the emotional and the day-to-day, you know, they have support on how to put on makeup and how to put on eyeliner, and you're caregiving for someone with memory and cognition issues, and there's no support for that. Are you kidding me? So I love what you're doing.
Thank you. We really, really, really appreciate hearing that. Amazing, amazing interview today. Honestly, sorry to all the interviews, but literally one of my favorite ones. I loved your perspective.
Thank you.
And please tune in to next week for our next episode of Memories Caregiver Spotlight. And please check out her information below. Such an amazing resource. All right. Thank you so much, Jonda.